Okay. So welcome. Hold on, let me. Jason Murphy, Wednesday night. Glad you're here. Couple of you in the room, couple of you in the Zoom. Maybe more people will arrive. Let's see where to begin. Well, I mean, we will do some meditation, and then I'm kind of in between continuing the conversation from last week, where I began to talk about the hindrances and ways to work with the hindrances. There seemed to be some interest in that, and I think there's a lot involved. And then I also have another kind of topic in my mind, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, anyone new that wants to introduce themselves? Okay. Well, glad you're here. Yeah, so let's find a posture that's workable, that's sustainable. I'm going to do a particular body-centered meditation today that's really useful when the mind is agitated or anxious. Last week I talked about hindrances, and one of the hindrances is restlessness or agitation, busyness in the mind. Sometimes we call it anxiety, distraction. There's lots of different words we could use, but so I thought I would give you this particular practice that I learned in northeastern Thailand at a monastery called Wat Rampong, which the English version is Northern Insight Meditation Center, just outside of Chiang Mai. And I was there, I don't know, this was years and years ago. But I took a lot of really great tools from this particular monastery that had a mix of Burmese practices and Thai practices, because it was right on the border of Burma and Thailand, which are two of the countries that I have both been to and practiced fairly extensively. Anyway, this is called a touch point meditation, and touch point meditation is basically a concentration practice that is moving. So the idea, mostly when people talk about body-centered practices, is kind of sweeping through the body, kind of head to feet, feet to head, bringing awareness to the body, and it's kind of different places and sensations. And that's great. That's a wonderful practice. I think it leads to a lot of insight. And this particular practice is a little bit more focused. So it's called touch point, meaning I will kind of direct your attention or ask you to direct your attention to some specific areas: left foot, left knee, left hip, left shoulder, right shoulder, top of the head, center of the chest. And so this is kind of a way of expanding. So we'll start off with left foot, right foot, and then I'll expand and expand and expand. And the idea is you are placing, you find your own rhythm. Sometimes when the mind is really active, moving quickly can actually be really helpful. Left foot, right foot, but you're bringing your attention left foot. You're bringing your attention right foot. And then so on and so forth, left knee, right knee. So it's kind of like you're pointing your awareness and feeling into that particular point, touching with your mind that particular point on the body. And then we'll work through. And just like any other meditation, if the mind wanders off, just begin again. Start back at the left foot and kind of continue that process. And we'll kind of do a slow build. We'll work up to the top of the head, and then center of the chest is kind of the final point. All right, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so finding that posture that's workable, that's sustainable, where you can be relaxed and alert. And just having some connection with the experience of breathing. And before we get started with the touch point meditation, I will invite you to let go. Let go of anything earlier in the day, anything that's not now. Just see if you can let go. Let go of the story, let go of the aspects of the day that are no longer serving you. And then the next invitation is to let be. Let be whatever's here, whatever's present. Could be thoughts, could be feelings, sensations, sounds. Just let it all be. We don't have to get rid of it. Anything we couldn't let go of, can we let it be? Let it be here, yet in the background of our attention. And then letting in. Let in any positive intention for your sit this evening, positive intention for your life. So whatever comes during this meditation practice, if the mind is distracted, maybe just return to let go, let be, and let in as you reconnect your attention to the breath and the body. So as we begin to place the attention, finding a point on the left foot, bottom of the foot, center of the foot, a touch point, a place you'll return to, where you can connect with the felt sense of this part, left foot. And then shifting to the right foot. For the next few moments, just shifting back and forth, left foot, right foot, noticing any sensations that are present, perhaps labeling left foot, right foot. When you're ready, expanding to the left knee and the right knee, left foot, right foot, left knee, right knee, and repeat again and again, finding your own pace. When you feel ready, expanding to the left hip, left foot, right foot, left knee, right knee, left hip, and begin again. Going slow enough to connect in to each part, each point. When you're ready, expanding the awareness to the touch point in the right hip. As you move your awareness from point to point, just noticing what's present in each touch point. Sensation, coolness, warmth, tension, relaxation, whatever might come up in the mind or in the emotional body. When you're ready, expanding the touch point to the left shoulder. So shifting left foot, left knee, left hip, left shoulder. Then when you're ready, expanding to the right shoulder. And when you're ready, expanding to the top of the head. Over and over again. And when you're ready, expanding the awareness to the touch point at the center of the chest, the heart space or the center. Again and again, shifting from touch point to touch point, awareness of what's arising, letting go of what's not serving you, letting be what's present, and letting in any new insight, awareness, positive intention. The invitation now is to either slow down the movement from touch point to touch point, or let go of the touch points completely and just rest with the breath and a sense of open awareness. Good. As you're ready, allowing the eyes to open. So, anyone you want to report back any of the experiences that you feel like you have, or any questions about the particular technique of touch point meditation? Yeah.
Why is it so much easier to feel the contact in you? Like I can consistently, I'm able to connect with my feet, but pretty much anything higher than that, it's more of me just kind of looking with my mind's eye at the body part rather than feeling it.
Okay. I'm just going to repeat for the people online. So he was asking about, like, for him and maybe for others as well, easier to make contact and to really kind of absorb into the feeling of the feet, right? But then as you move to the other body parts, it was a little bit more distant, like you were looking at the part itself, not necessarily the felt sense of the let's say left knee or something, right? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a great answer for you. I mean, I do think that, our feet and our hands, we're probably used to contact and being aware of, at least on a kind of a peripheral level. Yeah, the pressure, the contact, so that it's easy to bring awareness there. I do find that also with my hands, like if I'm actually doing kind of a body scan where I'm like kind of going from feet, sweeping through the body, feet to head to feet kind of thing. It's kind of common, but not for everyone, but it's kind of common that the kind of neck to hips, like hips to neck, is kind of a dead zone for a lot of people. Now, for other people, there's so much going on within the kind of midsection that it's maybe it's hard to pinpoint, which is why I like this particular meditation, because the points are actually pretty neutral, right? Left foot, left knee, left hip, right hip. So it's kind of neutral, but we're still moving systematically kind of through the body, and then head, top of the head, and then center of the chest. There might be more happening by the time we get to the center of the chest. We've actually gained in more finite kind of attention or awareness. So that's my best kind of estimate about why. I would say try it for a period of time and see if it changes for you. Does that make sense? Okay. Thought I saw a hand. Michael raised his hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, some of the reflections on it were that from with shifting from spot to spot, shifting the focus from point to point, that it was easier to not drift away. That you would just go from one spot to another, and that tended to cut down on the attention, like drifting away. And then there was also another reflection that people talked about having pain in certain areas, and by moving from point to point, they wouldn't like fixate on the pain point. They'd be able to shift away from it, and they found benefit in that. And then there was someone had done walking with it, walked with it, and done combined walking meditation with going point to point. So that was some of the things that were like reflected on in the group.
Great. Anything to add for anyone else that was in that group on Zoom?
I would just ask, about combining it with walking meditation. I was having a little trouble with drowsiness, and it helped me not be drowsy. But once I started doing it, it actually seemed to be kind of in some ways a natural. Just I mean, left foot, right foot are obvious, but you just work your way through the body, and you get that step as a reminder. Okay, shift, focus, shift, focus.
Mhm.
It seemed to help out. The other comment I would make personally is that one thing some of you have the pleasure of looking forward to is feeling your joints hurt on a fairly regular basis. And so this does give you the opportunity to touch, okay, yep, there it is, and then go. So it's,
Mhm.
that was, I'm okay tonight. I'm not feeling much discomfort tonight, but other times I have. And that would be a nice way to just, not fixate on it, but yep, it's there, and move on. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else in the room?
I could say to Roger's point where I was wondering if I was not feeling things because I didn't want to feel the discomfort that might be there. So like one knee had a little tinge of like something uncomfortable in the joint. And instead of like really feeling that, I just kind of moved on.
Mhm.
So then, because like we were saying in our group, we all kind of had that same thing where we didn't have trouble feeling our feet. So I just wonder if there's other pain points in those other places that I'm actually not feeling on purpose,
Mm,
but
mm.
don't realize that that's what I'm doing.
Could you guys hear okay? Okay. No, Roger said no. So just some yeah, just wondering about like maybe using kind of like what you were saying, Roger, like using the shifting from one point to another as a possible distraction or avoidance of whatever might be discomfort. Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple things that have come up. First of all, brilliant, Roger. Shifting it to walking, doing the same touch point meditation, but adding the walking to work against the drowsiness. Great. I think that's brilliant and could totally work, right? Because there is that natural, and actually even just in the walking, all of those points, besides maybe the chest, but all of the points there's some activation happening. Well, maybe the top of the head too, but definitely all in the joints, in the the feet and the knees and the hips and the shoulders, definitely feeling each one of them as you're taking a step. So yeah, good way. That's a great variation, not one that I've actually ever utilized. Walking meditation is a body-centered concentration practice, so it's in the same line. Yeah, and it could be as a way to I think it has a dual purpose. I think if someone, let's say, has chest pain or back pain or something like that, it could be a good way to gain awareness of the body without being hyperfixated, like I think Mike said that somebody had mentioned, and maybe this came up here as well, hyperfixated on that one point. Like I have kind of a shoulder injury, and it's not glaring, but it's there, and the shifting just allows it to, it doesn't have to be a major focus or fixated on that point where you're sending a signal going, you're in pain, you should move, you should do something, this is hell, whatever the story is. That so we're just kind of moving from point to point. The main purpose, I think, of this is that it helps to collect the attention in a concentrated way, yet at the same time calming the kind of the discursive mind. And did you guys find that to be true at all? That the movement just allows for less distraction? Yeah. Okay.
would say yes, except when I got to the center,
Mm-hmm.
then it seemed like all the thoughts and feelings came to the front, and then I got off on like a thought
Mm-hmm.
train, and so you called us back to left foot, right foot, and I was like, oh shit. I got
Mm-hmm.
lost when I got here.
Yeah.
It was different.
And then what happened?
Then I went back to the concentrated.
So you were just able to let go of whatever the.
Once your voice like redirected
Yeah.
me, then I realized what happened,
Mhm.
but I was very lost in it.
Mhm. Yeah, it happens. Right. And it's possible that that's where there's work to do. And I added that. I hadn't used that in the past, and I've been doing that was when I practice this to kind of rest in that heart space, which is the seat of emotion, which is the kind of emotional center, or what's called chitta, which is the kind of seat of the heart mind in Buddhism. And so the idea is kind of, shifting back, forth, just these anatomical parts, and then resting in, it's not really a part, right? And it's really more the seat of the mind. And so it makes sense that that's what would come up, and then shifting back, right? That's the trick, I guess, is to experience what's happening there, rest there for a moment, but then just like if it was knee pain, or if it was, the left shoulder, or, whatever, just then moving back to the practice. So good. Yeah.
Well, I know walking meditation is a thing, but what about like other physical activities? I find myself challenging people when they say, oh, surfing's my meditation, running's my meditation.
I think that surfing or running, I think that they're mindful activities. So the question was like, is there other things that people can do? I think that yoga is is a moving meditative practice, especially if someone has been doing it for a long time and they're kind of really into, the sun salutations, or, whatever the asanas are, the positions or postures. So kind of doing things like that. Riding a bicycle it's also a mindfulness activity. So I think anything like that. Sometimes I find that riding my motorcycle, I'm very mindful of what's happening, and, in each turn, in each moment, aware of my surroundings.
Sure, you have to be in the moment when you're doing those things, but is it meditation? It's a separate thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be a form of meditation. Yeah. Yeah. But, different than what we were just doing, there's this description of what actually helps us to gain in meditative awareness or practice. And it's a balance between mindfulness. So mindfulness is this kind of aware of what's happening within me and around me in any given moment. This is my definition of mindfulness. Awareness of what's happening within me and around me in any given moment. So this is kind of a global sense of, I'm aware of what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I'm smelling, what I'm tasting, what I'm touching, what I'm feeling. So that's mindfulness. And then concentration. So in order to ride a bicycle, you need enough concentration, which is also effort, right? But enough concentration to stay kind of focused on what you're doing. But then you also need to have enough mindfulness to be aware. You can't just, if you're just going straight, I'm just going straight, concentrating on riding the bicycle, then you're going to hit something, a tree, a telephone pole, a car, whatever. So you have to be mindfully aware of, where the sidewalk is and where the other cars are, and, spatially aware, right? So it's a blend of those two. So there's the effort of kind of keeping going, returning again and again. There's the awareness of what's happening. And then there is the staying focused on whatever it is that you're doing, breathing or walking or yoga, or, yeah. Those are some of my thoughts. I think it can be a bit of a cop out sometimes. The like, oh, surfing is my meditation or hiking is my meditation. Where I think, yeah, it's mindfulness, but is it concentrated mindful awareness? Is it what we're calling when we say I'm meditating? And for some people, it's the best they can do, and that's great. And so I think what we do here is we try to balance the effort that can be found within exercise, like, going to the gym and working out at the gym can be a really great practice, and it's really useful, can be mindful. There can be some focus and concentration also happening there. Is that considered a meditation? Not necessarily, no. But it is focused, attentive exercise. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it can be really good, has its own benefit. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anything from those of you online? All right. Well, I think I'm going to shift to doing a little bit more discussion of what I started last week. So last week I started talking about the hindrances, and I was talking about the what are also called the 5 faculties. So the 5 faculties found within Buddhism, or the 5, it's then their efforts, their tools that we're working on improving as we begin the path towards freedom from suffering. And then the things that get in our way. And so what those are faith, right, and effort and concentration and mindfulness and wisdom. So we are utilizing these 5 tools. We're utilizing faith. What's faith? Faith is inspiration, confidence, gaining in confidence through your own practice, not blind faith of I said this is true, so you have to believe it, like most religions, but actually verifiable faith is really what the Buddha talked about, which is this is the path that I found to relieve myself from suffering. But don't believe me, try it for yourself. And here's some tools to do that. Effort. Well, it's going to take some effort in order to get to where you want to get to, or so it's going to take some effort in order to sustain this practice. It's going to take some effort and some increase in concentration, or increase in mindfulness, or gaining in insight or wisdom. And so these 5 tools they're being really kind of utilized throughout all of the teachings. So what happens once we start on this path is that some things get in the way. Maybe you even experience them tonight. This particular meditation of this concentrated practice, where you're both shifting your focus and focusing very specifically on particular points, I think it helps kind of narrow the window of opportunity for the mind to just fucking go squirrel, except for maybe into the chest, right? You know what I mean by when it goes squirrel, like just shoots off into some future or past, or something you hear, or it could be anything. It's just the mind is so ready to just grab onto any little entertainment, that's at least my mind anyway. And we'll create fantasies, and we'll create, anger or aversion or ill will just kind of arise in the mind. Usually it's something that, we're probably been avoiding for a period of time, or it comes into play as a distraction. And then also sleepiness or drowsiness is something that arises. So we have wanting, craving, and then we have anger and aversion, which are, 2 sides of the same coin, so to speak. And then we have sleepiness or drowsiness, And then we have restlessness and agitation, right? So they're also two sides of the same coin. They're a little bit dissociative, actually. Sleepiness, dullness of mind is, so let's just do it like this. Craving, wanting, fantasy, and creating scenarios is a well, it's a distraction, but it's like shifting the focus. And then same thing with aversion, right? If I'm overcome with aversion, or I'm overcome with craving, then I'm not actually focused on the here and now. I'm focused on the what could be, or what didn't happen, or what could have happened, right? So there's some of that distraction. And then sleepiness or drowsiness is a dissociative experience, where there's a kind of a down regulating or a shutting down that can happen because maybe what we're experiencing, we don't want to experience, or there's some fear. Like a lot of times people say like, oh, I have a really hard time connecting with my body. And then what happens if we actually do connect with our bodies, or connect with our story about our body, right? What happens then? And can we be with that? Like the, let go, let be, let in that I spoke about. So then restlessness and agitation is another form of dissociation. It's dissociating away from whatever's happening, right? So they're all different forms, these hindrances, or different forms of dissociation. And then finally, doubt or disbelief. And doubt has a lot of different versions. So I'm gonna, let's see, do I feel like do you feel like I went through those enough? Do you feel like you understand the 5 hindrances? I'd like to kind of move into how the 5 faculties or 5 powers really help us to work with the hindrances. But I'm happy to give more if you have any questions, or I'm happy to give more detail on the hindrances. Okay. So let me just say this before we move on. The hindrances, they're called the hindrances because they literally hinder us from the capacity of our own meditative experience, from what can be experienced. And the working with the hindrances is not about getting rid of, but it's actually just about recognizing, seeing it for what it is, and then applying with the right tool to the right. So like we used concentration as an example of working with distraction, agitation, restlessness. Concentration works really well to calm the mind, to perhaps get a feeling of contentment, which in Buddhist language is called samadhi. So samadhi means one-pointedness, concentrated awareness. And when that happens, samadhi, this kind of one-pointedness, the body tends to feel content. There's a calm, there's a contentment. And then there's also a connection that can come from all of these practices coming together, where we start to then feel more connected, more whole. Like, so we're able to, like doing this kind of a body-centered meditation practice, over time, we'll begin to hopefully integrate a little bit more into all the aspects of this physical being. Now, that being said, the Buddha was not freed from these hindrances until the moment that he became enlightened. The final battle with Mara, Mara being the kind of personification of these hindrances, and greed, hatred, and delusion at their root, right? So I say that to say it's not like, oh, I've been meditating for, a couple of years now, I should just be better. Like I shouldn't have craving, or I shouldn't have, aversion, or shouldn't have, so that there's some kind of a judgment there. And so what I'm saying is it took a long time for the Buddha to, and a lot of effort and a lot of confidence. To keep going, increasing mindfulness, increasing concentration, gaining in wisdom. So try not to judge yourself too harshly if these things come about, because they will. All right, so there's a few ways of talking about that. There's an analogy that the Buddha gave around these mind states. And so I'm gonna read them. These are like classic kind of Buddhist teaching. To be freed from sensual desire. So this is kind of like how the Buddha talked about working with these and what it might feel like to be attacked by these hindrances. To be freed from sensual desire is like being relieved of a heavy debt. To be freed from aversion is like recovering from a physical illness. To be freed from sloth and torpor is akin to being released from prison. To be freed from agitation or restlessness and worry is like being liberated from slavery. And to be freed from doubt is like crossing a dangerous desert safely. So interesting, right? Interesting interpretations. So from the Buddhist perspective, sensual desire, agitating the mind is comparable to being heavily in debt, right? So this sensual desire is not just fantasy, but it's actually like that wanting or craving for things that feel good. And there's nothing wrong with wanting things that feel good, but when it becomes all-consuming, right? This is what we call obsession. And it's a distraction very often. So this idea of kind of finding that balance, but being relieved of a heavy debt. So I find that it's interesting, like the idea of being relieved of a heavy debt. So being in debt, like let's say owing, I don't know, student loans, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And even though it's not something you're worried about all the time, it's always kind of in the back of the mind for some people, right? And I think that's what's kind of being talked about. So being relieved of that kind of a debt, like maybe you're like this, maybe you're someone who has kind of had some debt that was going on, or you owed some money. I remember I owed this guy Jack, $20. He was like a friend of mine. I borrowed $20 from him. I was like 18 or something like that, 16, 18. I can't remember exactly, but and every time I would see him, he never asked me for it, but I knew I owed that guy $20. And it was like always in my mind, right? Until, I had this, it took me also, I didn't want to pay him. So it was also weighing on me, right? Because I didn't want to give up my money, my $20. I could spend it on so many other things. But eventually I paid him. And I remember like not having to have like that mental, every time I was around him, or if I thought he was going to be somewhere. Now, I wasn't fully obsessed in the way I'm describing it, but I'm using it as an example of like that idea of being, oh yeah, I don't have any debt that is weighing on me. And then so that's one example. And then the tension created through aversion being quite literally like a dis-ease. So what the Buddha was describing around recovering from a physical illness, right? So the way I kind of talk about this is the aversion being quite literally like a dis-ease, that kind of just agitation, that aversion of the world is not okay and I'm not okay. I don't feel okay. And having that kind of energy. So sloth and torpor, dulls and imprisons the mind. So and if you think about, depression I think this is really a lot of this sloth and torpor from the Buddhist perspective is very similar to what we describe as depression, this kind of feeling overcome or powerless to kind of act in some ways. And so this imprisons the mind, right? So part of the being released from prison, there's a liberation that can be a sense of freedom, a sense of openness. All right, agitation, restlessness, and worry can control the mind to such an extent that it is comparable, that is completely at its mercy. So agitation, restlessness, and worry can control the mind to such an extent that one is completely at its mercy, right? This kind of being in the whirlwind of our agitated, restless kind of thoughts. And even the physical sensation of that. And then just feeling like we have no control. This is where that concentration piece can really come into play. And then doubt. Doubt leaves one in a state of insecurity, not knowing which way to turn. So this kind of, the example that the Buddha gave, to be freed from doubt is like crossing a dangerous desert safely, right? So this idea of, can we find a sense of stability, a sense of safety within the practice? And doubt really affects our sense of kind of well-being, right? We're constantly questioning, is this the right thing to do? Am I doing the right thing right now? Shouldn't I be doing something else? There's something else going on I should probably be doing besides meditating, like that kind of doubt. Or, what is this shit? You know what I mean? Is this really, like, who is this guy that's, seems all high and mighty? Is he some kind of god? There's all kinds of things that people can come up with around doubt. A lot of it has to do with safety. Okay. So for these reasons, to challenge the hindrances as they arise, this is one of the ways that we begin to kind of utilize these tools. We can challenge the hindrances as they arise. And, recognizing, contemplating on whether this practice is helping us or not helping us. And most of the time, I think, at least it's been true for me, this is where the verifiable faith comes in, going on a day-long meditation retreat or a 3-day or a 5-day or a week-long, or, going and living in a monastery for a period of time, or, doing some, or even just committing to sit in meditation every day. And then, do you gain in some confidence in this practice? Is there some result that is benefiting you? And then that growing is hopefully decreases the doubt, right? So there's some faith that decreases the doubt. So the Buddha talked of not recognizing the hindrances when they arise or during meditation practice is really mismeditation. Now, he doesn't talk about this very often in the teachings of like the ways that you're fucking up meditation. Like he doesn't really do that much. He's more trying to steer people towards, more insight and more, developing of practice. But there's a couple points in which he talks about the idea of mismeditation. So like spacing out and calling it meditation is not meditation. That's mismeditating, right? Like, well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. When we're lost in our kind of thoughts or in our emotions or in the future or in the past, then we're, from the Buddhist perspective, we're caught in a hindrance and we're mismeditating. So we're not actually meditating. We're actually just letting the mind spin on its own, but it might feel like there's something happening. Oh, I'm really working this problem out, and there can be some benefit in that. But from the Buddhist perspective, it's when you recognize, oh, this is what's happening in the mind, and then bring the attention back to one of the, whether it's a breath or a body or the practice, just kind of like even what was described tonight. Then this is kind of realigning oneself with meditation. So recognizing the hindrance when they arise or during the meditation practice, this is one of the things that we're trying to do. So work with the hindrance as practice, recognizing the hindrances as they arise and acknowledging their passing or when they're not present. Knowing the conditions of the future prevention of the arising of or the non-arising of the hindrance, right? So recognizing, oh, there's no agitation. Like maybe that's the main thing. Let's say agitation or restlessness, right, is one of the main aspects of the hindrances. So by recognizing, oh, there is no hindrance of restlessness or agitation in the mind, and then just, kind of solidifying that, okay, this is what that feels like, then you're more likely to, when you're in that space, recognize that you're in that space, right? So one of the ways, and then also turning your awareness, toward the hindrance itself. So when we are overcome with a hindrance, that we're aware of what it is, we begin to label it as the hindrance that it is. So by the felt sense, oh, sleepiness, sloth, torpor in the mind, or agitation, or worry, doubt, craving, fantasy. I had a really strong fantasy retreat. The whole retreat, it was a 10-day retreat, and it was kind of like from the beginning to the end, I just didn't really want to be there. And my mind just kept jumping into all of these different fantasies. And I was kind of in between retreats. I went to one retreat and I was going to another retreat. And then I had 3 back-to-back retreats set up for this summer. And my mind was just so fantasy in all kinds of scenarios. Some were sexual, but not all of them were sexual. Some of them were about food that I wasn't eating, that I wanted to eat, about places that I wanted to go, that I wasn't at. It was just all about whatever was happening, sitting there meditating in this beautiful forest with, at this Tibetan kind of monastery, was just dissatisfying in some way. And there was all these other things I'd rather be doing. And then the teacher just began to kind of say, when that happens and you're kind of floating, to just label it as what it is: fantasy, craving, wanting, and then back to whatever the practice was. And then after that, I was like, okay, that worked for a minute. And then I would, it'd be right back into the beach in Hawaii that I wanted to be on, instead of sitting on this hard ass cushion, right? And then the teacher, his name is Gil Fronsdale, he basically said, okay, so when it arises, just say not now. You're not going to think about it right now. You're not going to engage in that thought right now. Just not now. And kind of find a way to kind of move it, let it go. So this is where I got what I call the not now practice. So part of awareness towards the hindrance and taking the power out of it is by naming it, by labeling it, and then also by seeing that you don't have to be overcome by it. You can use your mindful awareness to see, this is the hindrance of fantasy, this is the hindrance of craving, this is the hindrance of aversion, this is the hindrance of doubt. And by seeing it and naming it, then you're not overwhelmed by it, you're not overcome by it. And you can do that for really any of what comes up in the mind or emotion. Okay, so there's this teaching, Mara appears again and again in the Buddha's life, which refers to the hindrances, right? Simply acknowledging, I see you. So one of the things that happens after this moment of enlightenment, where the Buddha has vanquished the hindrances, right, and becomes enlightened. Now, that doesn't mean that Mara or the temptations of greed, hatred, or delusion are gone from the world. They're not gone from the world. They're everywhere around the Buddha. And Mara returns. So in other words, the thought of craving or the thought of doubt or the thought of aversion re-arise in the enlightened Buddha's mind. And with his enlightened, awareness, is able to just see it very clearly, very quickly. Oh, I see you, Mara. Oh, I see you. I see you, fantasy. And then just not engaging with it, and then it would disappear. So this is one of the ways in which we're working with the 5 faculties, right? Awareness. Well, before any thoughts, any questions about what I've said so far? No, you guys are getting it. Sometimes I just feel like I'm just like lecturing. It's like I'm just lecturing, but it is kind of, I mean, it's a teaching. But if you have questions, just speak up. All right. So there's just a little bit more, and then we'll call it a day. So there are normal obstacles on our path, and these can be worked with. These are the hindrances, right? And so what are some of the examples? Let me see. So some of them we've already talked about: awareness, mindfulness, right? See the hindrance. I see you, aversion. I see you, sleepiness. We already talked about this. So for that first aspect, using mindfulness, using awareness as a tool. This is going to help us, and we can do this throughout the day. Now, I like to do spot check mindfulness. Take a moment and just take a breath. Stop. Take a breath. Observe what's happening in your body. Maybe scan through the body, head to feet, feet to head, and then observe, and then proceed with awareness. You don't have to do any big deal. Just one breath, 4 count inhale, 6 count exhale, scanning through the body, just learning to kind of check in all times. I did this consistently for about a year. I did this every day, and it was kind of like moments of boredom, like standing in a line or waiting for something or someone, or let's say I placed a coffee order and I was waiting for my coffee, impatient as fuck, like, where's my coffee, and then stop, take a breath, observe what's happening, proceed. Maybe the desire to have my coffee would have diminished, or the agitation that was present, being aware of the agitation that's present. Just as an example, driving, waiting at a red light. Yeah, I could say waiting for a bus, but I haven't waited for a bus for a very long time. Well, when I was in Thailand, I was waiting for some buses, but yeah, I don't think I was very agitated about it. All right, okay, effort. So increase your effort, strong determination, rebel against the tendencies of the mind. So this strong determination is kind of like, okay, in the mind, let's say there is an opportunity to, like, you're sitting at home and, you have the timer set, but then you're kind of like, it's a little bit boring. I could probably be doing some other things. So that's some doubt, right? There's some agitation there. Increasing the effort, staying for the 20 minutes. This is why it's good to set a timer, right? Staying for the time that you've allowed it. And it could be 10 minutes, doesn't matter. But committing to that time and committing to it regularly, right? That's another thing. And then also, so that's strong determination. Part of strong determination also, especially when it comes to restlessness and agitation, is to be a fucking statue. Like, don't move. Like, commit. I'm not going to move until that bell rings. And I don't care if it's my knee hurts. I don't care if I have an itch on my nose. I don't care if my phone pings. Like, strong determination can be really helpful. And that it actually teaches us some resolve, that regardless of what's happening in our lives, we can sit through and be with whatever the experience is, and that everything passes. Right. So rebelling against the mind's tendency to do whatever the fuck it wants. That's really what we're trying to do here when we're increasing our effort. So confidence, right? We've already talked about this, getting inspiration from the Buddha or teachers or a book that you've read or some podcast or anything like that, right? Increasing in your own confidence, concentration, and increase your curiosity of the breath or of walking or of whatever you're doing, and just like kind of increasing your curiosity, it brightens the mind. Oh, I'm just going to be very curious about what's happening here in my experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither, right? And then wisdom. So not seeing or seeing the impermanence of this too shall pass, So I'm sorry, not now. The not now practice is really using wisdom and seeing the impermanence of things. That the fantasy eventually fades away, that the desire for whatever that yummy thing is you want to eat will eventually pass, that the wisdom of impermanence and so using this kind of phrase, this too shall pass, right? That which arises passes away. This is understanding and developing wisdom. So these are just some of the ways in which we can begin to rebel against the mind's tendency to be asleep, to check out, to avoid. And we need to rebel against that, which is familiar, predictable, safe, and painful. That's what keeps us locked in old habits and old behaviors. Familiar, predictable, safe, and painful. And so part of what we're trying to do here is work on that which is unfamiliar, which may be a little unpredictable, feels a little unsafe, but ultimately leads to peace, ease, contentment. So that's about what I got for today. So my hope is that we can begin to change our habits of letting go and letting the mind do what it wants, right? We can begin to change these habits and begin to really enjoy the aspects of happiness, tranquility, joy, and peace that are already within us and just need to be uncovered. This is part of the unfolding, the excavation of our true nature, which is joy, tranquility, peace. As one of my teachers would say, Ajahn Pasanno, the natural resting place of the mind. So that's about all I have for you tonight. If you guys have any other thoughts, questions, reflections in the room or on Zoom, now would be a good time. Okay, let's call it a night. So thank you for your time and attention. Please know that you can help to support this center, Against the Stream, by donating to Against the Stream. So there's a bowl at the desk with a QR code on it. And then you also can donate online at Against the Stream donations. And then if you want to support me, you can also support me and my teaching and my practice through Venmo at No BS Buddhist. Maybe it's the No BS Buddhist. I kind of don't remember. Or Jason Murphy. At Venmo is the best way. And so thank you for your time and attention. Let's take a moment. And we call this sharing of the merit, right? Which is this old Buddhist tradition of basically saying, like, I'm not doing this for me. And I'm not actually doing it. We're not doing it just for us. That we're actually taking and cultivating this practice for the benefit of all beings. And that's what it means by sharing the merit, right? So you can put your hands together or not, it's up to you. And just take a moment and just acknowledge yourself for showing up for this, hour and a half on a Wednesday night, for practicing in your own meditation, for putting in the effort, the mindfulness, the concentration, for hopefully gaining some confidence in this practice and in your own ability to free yourself from suffering. And then in the next breath, we just recognize that we don't only do this practice for ourselves, but may all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. And may all beings do what needs to be done to free their own hearts and minds from suffering. May we all be free.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks.